Have you ever seen someone who has passed on, and yet, deep down, you still feel they're very near? Maybe it's a soft light passing across the windowsill, a sudden sense of peace in the middle of the night, or a dream without clear form, but so vivid that you don't want to wake up. This is not a story meant for you to believe, nor is it a doctrine for you to follow. It is simply a telling from someone who crossed the final boundary and came back to tell us what he saw. His name was Edgar Cayce, and what he witnessed may not be for the mind to understand, but for the soul to remember. Edgar Cayce once said that the soul doesn't leave the body with noise or shock. There is nothing dramatic, no thunder, no blinding lights like in the movies, only stillness, a strange kind of stillness, not of death, but of transition. That moment, he said, is like removing a heavy coat after a long winter. At first, it feels unfamiliar, a sense of emptiness, of sudden lightness, and then complete ease, no longer the weight of the body, the pressure of the heartbeat, the breath, or the constant stream of thoughts. In his trance state, what Cayce called the deep sleep, he would feel a subtle resonance, then light spreading gently. After that, everything dissolved. No time, no space, no body. Yet, he remained more awake than ever, not dreamy, not vague, but clear, alert, pure. In that state, Cayce no longer saw with his eyes, yet images appeared more vividly than in waking life. His body lay on the bed, still and quiet, but he, his true self, was above it, watching from an entirely different perspective. He saw the room. He saw the people standing around him, some asking questions, some listening, but none of them belonged to him anymore. It was just a small stage where he had once acted, once suffered, once grown weary. Now, he stood outside of it, no longer the actor. He was the witness. In that space, there were no words, no thoughts, as we usually know them, only instant understanding. Everything he needed to know was already there. Every question seemed to dissolve because the answer was already inside the light. He described the space he entered as a sphere of light, without ceiling, without floor, without boundaries. In that place, nothing needed to be spoken. There was no sound, but there was sensation. There was connection. There was knowing. And above all, there was a distinct feeling. I am returning to a place I never truly left. There was no pain, no fear, only a release so gentle it felt almost sacred. Cayce often emphasized that the moment the soul leaves the body is not a loss. It's a release, like an exhale after holding your breath for too long. Light, clean, transparent. What makes that moment sacred is not that it marks death, but that it reveals a forgotten truth. We were never really this body. We were never just a name, a role, or a burden. We simply wore them for a while to learn, to experience, to remember something ancient. In that light, Cayce felt what millions of near-death experiencers have also described: a present someone or something waiting, not pushing, not commanding, just standing there, gentle, peaceful, like a wordless invitation. No one drags you away, but you know it's time to go. Not because someone told you, but because something inside you is ready. Cayce believed that this moment when you look at yourself from the outside is the first lesson of life after death. No one comes to interrogate you. No one judges your rights or wrongs. There is only you looking back at yourself, and in that moment, you see clearly what still clings, what has been released, what made you heavy, and what is waiting for you on the other side of the light. Death, as seen through Cayce's lens, is not an ending. It is the beginning of a greater awareness, deeper, clearer, more awake, no longer bound by the brain, by memory. or by belief. It is the moment the soul steps out of its cage and into its own infinite field. And when you reach that moment, you don't need to believe anything, because you will know not all souls leave the earthly realm as gently as removing a coat. Not everyone is ready to step into the light. Some souls remain at the threshold, not moving forward, not turning back. Edgar Cayce called this the state of gray light, not dark, but not yet bright, not despairing, but not at peace either. It is the space between two worlds, like a long corridor with no doors, where the soul is nothing but itself, yet still held back by things it cannot release. These souls are not evil. They are not judged. They are not punished. They are simply not ready, because somewhere within them, a thread still remains, an unfinished relationship, a resentment left unresolved, a mistake they cannot forgive themselves for. They are not held back by death, but by the memories of life, memories like small stones in a coat seemingly light, but after being carried too long, they weigh the soul down. Cayce said that souls caught in this state often don't even realize they've left the physical world. They linger near familiar places, an old home, a loved one, a hospital room, or a moment etched deeply in their memory. For them, time doesn't move. Emotions don't settle. Everything repeats over and over, like a melody with no end. Some souls remain because of words left unspoken. Some remain because they believe they must protect someone even though they no longer can. And some don't move on because deep down, they don't believe they deserve the light, but the light has never judged them. Cayce believed that within every gray space, there are always gentle presences, formless, voiceless, just a quiet sense of being, like the presence of love, like a soft reminder, you are not forgotten. You were never left behind. For Cayce, the deepest truth wasn't how many souls were stuck. It was how many were imprisoning themselves because they hadn't yet forgiven others or themselves. That is why he always emphasized forgiveness is not a gift for others. It is a gift for the soul. To forgive is to cut an invisible thread that binds us to darkness, to open a door that no one else can open except ourselves. And sometimes, the one who opens the door first isn't the soul that's stuck, but someone still living, quietly lighting a candle in their heart, calling the departed with unconditional love. When a living person offers genuine forgiveness, when someone sits in stillness and calls the name of the one who has passed, from the heart, the door to the light may appear, not dazzling, not loud, just a small crack. But sometimes, all it takes is that tiny crack, and the soul can find its way home. Because light does not need to blind in order to guide. It only needs to be recognized. It only needs the soul to whisper a simple truth. I'm tired. I want to go home. And in that moment, the gray begins to fade, not because someone came to rescue them, but because they stopped resisting themselves. That Cayce believed with all his heart. No soul is lost forever. Some simply need more time to remember that they were never alone. After the soul has gently released its earthly attachments, after it has passed through the gray light and begun returning to its natural state of freedom, something extraordinary happens. What Cayce called the Great Life Review. It is not a court, not a judgment hall with angels, ledgers, or scales. It is simply you standing before yourself, but not the you thought you were. The real essence without the mask, without defense, without excuses. You are not asked, what did you do? But rather, what feeling did you leave behind in this world? And then the real begins. But this is not an ordinary film, playing back the events of your past. It is a living stream of sensation. You don't just see yourself. You feel what others felt when you were in their life. Did you say something that hurt someone deeply? You will feel their heart sink, the weight of disappointment settle in their chest. Did you stay silent when someone needed you most? You will know the sting of abandonment from the inside. But likewise, if you ever held someone in the moment they were breaking, if you ever reached out a hand when someone had nothing left to hold on to, if you ever smiled at a stranger just to bring a little warmth to their day, you will feel that too, in its full, unfiltered purity, not distorted by ego, expectations, or conditions, just pure love, unmoved and unforgotten. And in that moment, you understand it wasn't your actions that defined your soul. It was the intention behind them. A polite word spoken without sincerity leaves no light behind, but a warm gaze, even in silence, can glow like a star. Cayce called it the soul's mirror. It does not shame you. It does not frighten you. It simply reflects without distortion who you are when you're no longer pretending. And the final question is not, were you right or wrong, but were you true to yourself? For many souls, this is the moment of awakening. Some weep, not because they are condemned, but because for the first time in hundreds of lifetimes, they see themselves, what they tried to forget, what they avoided. There is no one left to blame, no reasons left to hide behind, only you meeting yourself within a quiet, honest universe. But the most beautiful thing Cayce ever said was this: even if you realize that you hurt others, that you missed chances, that you failed in many ways, the light is still there. It does not close. It does not retreat. It simply waits silently until you are ready to accept yourself again. Because the light does not love you because you are perfect. It loves you because you are real. And perhaps the only thing the soul must do in that sacred moment is not to apologize to the universe, but to say to itself, I see now, and I won't forget again. When the great life review quietly closes, when the soul is no longer held back by regret or resentment, it begins to drift, but not as a lost wandering. Rather, it moves toward a place where its inner essence feels aligned. Cayce once said that there is no heaven and no hell, as we've been taught, no eternal land reserved for the good, no endless fire for the wrong. What exists are frequencies, bands of vibration, where each soul is naturally drawn, like a drop of water returning to its stream. Some souls, Cayce said, enter spaces as still as a twilight lake. No words, no forms, only a sense of peace wrapping around everything, soft, like a breath without ripples. But other souls arrive in cities of light, not cities as we know them. No buildings, no streets, but living fields of energy where every being glows from within. These lights do not compete, do not hide, do not try to outshine one another. They merge like a symphony where each soul is a unique note in perfect harmony. There, no one asks who you are, because you are the answer. No introduction needed, no record to present. Your internal frequency, its brightness, its clarity, its warmth naturally guides you to the place you belong. You are not taken there. You arrive because you resonate. Cayce described these soul realms like a spiral staircase, each step a different state of being. No gatekeepers, no judges. You can only rise when something inside you has become lighter, cleaner, brighter. And the strange thing is, you remember, not learn, not discover, but remember a place you once belonged to. Long, long ago, some souls return to realms of pure thought, no form, no language, only living ideas flowing past one another like ribbons of silk. There, you are no longer gender, no longer age, no longer identity. You are a field of consciousness, pure, formless, but fully present. Other souls, still carrying a little weight, a little residue. Pause in gentler realms where there are still shapes, still colors, still environments that resemble the earthly world, but brighter, cleaner. There, they rest, they heal, they continue to learn what was left undone. No one forces them forward, no one holds them back. It all depends on how ready they are to continue, Cayce said. You do not ascend in the afterlife. You simply remember the true height of your being. And that remembrance, the energy you've gathered through every loving choice, every forgiving act, every sincere intention, is what carries you farther. No one is lifted by privilege. No one is held down by punishment. It is only you and the light you radiate that becomes your guide. And if you ask, how do I know which realm I'm in? The answer isn't found in knowledge. It lives in your feeling. The lighter you are, the higher you rise, the more you love, the closer you feel to home. At the highest realm Cayce ever reached in his soul journeys, he said, there were no shapes, no names, no me and others, only merging, only one vast breath, as if the universe itself were whispering through its presence. And he said no more. He fell silent, because some things cannot be spoken. They can only be remembered when your soul is still enough to hear itself coming home. The question that was repeated time and time again in the thousands of readings Edgar Cayce conducted was not, who am I? But rather, why don't I remember? We are born, cry our first cry, open our eyes to the world, and at that very moment, a door quietly closes within the soul. The door of memory, of essence, of all that we have ever been across countless past lives. Edgar Cayce did not believe that we lose our spiritual memory. He said, we simply forget for a while like an actor stepping into a role, willingly allowing the mask to cover their true face, in order to learn something that only forgetting can teach. Because if you clearly remembered that you are light, you could never truly understand darkness. If you remembered you were infinite, you could never feel fear, limitation, or even pain. And it is precisely these things, the ones that make life so fragile, that are the very lessons a soul cannot learn anywhere else. Earth, despite its suffering, is the most precious classroom in the universe, not because it is perfect, but because it makes us forget just long enough to choose to remember again of our own free will. Cayce said that forgetting is not a punishment. It is a sacred veil, so the soul isn't overwhelmed by the flood of lifetimes, heartbreaks, and mistakes already past. And that veil only begins to thin when we are still enough, when we pause in the chaos of life and quietly ask, who am I? Without name, age, title, or fear. In many of his readings, Cayce helped people access their soul memory. A woman who thought she was suffering from unexplained depression turned out to be carrying emotional pain from a past life. Betrayed during war, a child who was terrified of water, refusing to go near the lake, had once drowned hundreds of years ago. And some people, upon meeting for the first time, felt an unexplainable familiarity, not because of anything tangible, but because their hearts had once been bound together in another place, at a time reason can no longer recall. The soul's forgetting is not a loss. It is a quiet retreat, so that the past does not overwhelm the present. Because if all memories returned at once, we would live like shattered mirrors, reflecting everything, but no longer knowing who we are. Cayce believed that part of the awakening journey is to remember slowly, gently, and patiently. No force, no panic, just one afternoon. You walk past a place you've never been and feel as if you've lived there before. A glance meets yours, and you feel as though you've seen your old soul in someone else's eyes. A sentence touches you, not because it's beautiful, but because it awakens something you never truly forgot. just something that had stayed silent for too long. And Cayce said, if you are listening to a story about the soul, about death, about the journey home, and something stirs quietly within you, that is not a new feeling. That is memory, not from your brain, but from the deepest part of who you are. Because the truth is this, you were never a body searching for a soul. You are a soul, temporarily dwelling in this body, to experience, to learn, to love, and then when the time comes, to remember who you truly are, contrary to the popular belief that human beings are born by chance, that we are thrown into life like a game of random lottery. Edgar Cayce said, we choose everything, not with the mind, but with a deep inner knowing of the soul, a silent agreement where each soul looks back upon itself and decides what it will learn next. In his out-of-body state, Cayce once witnessed a soul preparing for reincarnation, but it wasn't like choosing a role in a play or embarking on a grand adventure. It was more like a symphony composed of light, memory, and promise. There was no coercion, no external force imposing, only the soul itself setting the conditions for its own growth. We choose our parents, not because they are perfect, but because they provide the exact circumstances we need. A cold and distant mother might be a mirror reflecting the lesson of compassion. A strict and rigid father could be the challenge that teaches us to find our worth from within. We choose our country, our culture, our era of rebirth. Some souls choose to be born into times of war not to suffer, but to awaken the courage that had lain dormant. Some choose lives with physical disabilities, not as punishment, but to learn the lesson of pure presence, where value does not come from the body. In fact, Cayce said, some souls even choose the people who will wound them, not because they desire pain, but because at the deepest level, they know only through the wound can light find a way in. Reincarnation is not a cycle of repetition. It is a conscious continuation. Each soul carries a vibrational map, where unfinished lessons are gently brought forward to be completed. You once longed to be heard. In this life, you may be learning to truly listen. You once caused harm out of confusion. In this life, you may be learning compassion, starting with yourself. No one is watching over you with a scorecard. No one is grading you. No one is forcing you to return to earth. It's just that, in a quiet moment, you catch a glimpse of the space between who you once were and who you could become, and you whisper to the universe, I want to try again. That is not surrender. That is an act of deep courage. Because, to reincarnate means you will forget who you are. You will enter a new body small, fragile. You will meet people who might hurt you. You will love again, lose again, fall again, hope again. And still, you choose it. Because deep down, you are not returning to repeat the pain. You are returning to complete something unfinished. Cayce called this the soul's voluntary return, a choice not made from fear, but from a profound trust that life, even in its shadows, is the only place where light can shine so clearly. And if you are living a difficult life right now, perhaps it's not because you are being punished, but because your soul is strong enough to choose the harder lesson. There is a special space that exists between death and rebirth. Not heaven, not earth, but a stillness, a realm where time does not flow, and the soul feels no urgency. Cayce called it the hallway between two lifetimes, a transitional space, a resting place where the soul is cleansed, comes to understand itself, and chooses its direction once again. There is no fixed form. It is not a room, a gate, or a shimmering world of light. It is a unique state of being where the soul is no longer pulled by outer noise and begins to truly hear its inner voice, pure and unfiltered. Here, the soul begins to release. It releases the unspoken anger, releases the resentment. it never had the courage to face in its last life. Releases even the image of self, the identity it clung to so tightly through an entire lifetime. No one enforces this purification. There is no gatekeeper saying, "You must let this go." There is only the light, gentle and silent, inviting you to become yourself, but lighter. And strangely, in this silence, the soul hears most clearly all that it once ignored while alive. An unfinished conversation, an unsent apology, a dream never allowed to begin. There is no teacher in this hallway, no doctrine, only questions that require no answers. And it is you fully present who begins to answer them. How did I live? How did I love? What did I turn away from, even when I knew I needed it? Did I become a part of the light? Or did I merely survive the days? Cayce described how every soul gains access to memories deeper than the personal memories that belong to the collective soul, to the great current of life to which we all belong. And from this place, a new decision begins to form, not because it's time to return, but because the soul wants to continue, wants to love again, wants to learn forgiveness, wants to rise from an old lesson, but this time with new eyes. Before reincarnating, Cayce said, the soul sees its future path in the form of light and meaning, not as a scripted fate, but as an unwritten melody, its themes chosen, but the song still open to flow. You may choose your parents, your country, your circumstances, your body, your gender, but you do not choose to suffer. You choose the opportunity to transform. In that hallway, you do not sign a binding contract. You whisper, and the universe listens. I choose this challenge because it will awaken in me the capacity for unconditional love. I choose this limitation to learn how not to be limited within. I choose this time in history because the light must be held steady amidst chaos. And then the soul begins to prepare for return. No baggage is brought, only a single intention pure, small, but deeply powerful. I will go, and I will remember, however slowly, that I have never been abandoned, that all I need to learn has always lived within me. And so, a new breath begins in the womb. A heart begins to beat. A soul like yours steps once more into the dance of shadow and light, not to be forgotten, but to remember itself on its own terms. If you've walked with me through all 8 parts, know that each one was not a lesson, but a step back toward the deepest part of yourself. You may not remember everything you've heard, and you don't have to understand it all, at least not yet, because the things that truly touch the soul never arrive through logic. They come when you've been silent long enough to realize you are remembering something ancient, but never truly forgotten. And maybe tonight, as you lie down, a strange dream will come. Not loud, not clear, just a feeling, as if standing before an invisible threshold, where no voices remain, only wind and light and something you cannot name, but that makes you feel free. And if you feel you are no longer alone, even in a place where no one understands you, then maybe someone has been quietly walking beside you all along, not to lead you, but simply to remind you you were never lost. Edgar Cayce once said, "You are not a body seeking a soul. You are a soul learning how to become real." And if some part of you gently stirred, if a thin layer of dust was just blown off your heart, then please don't forget that feeling too quickly, because this is not the end of a video. It is the beginning of a return. When you are ready, the light won't shout. It will simply whisper, "I'm still here," waiting for you to remember who you are.